Okay, namaste, hello friends, and welcome to this evening, windy evening. I don't know whether you can hear, but we have some nice background village festivities sounds to accompany us. Some religious chanting and bells and whistles, drums. The atmosphere of India, very beautiful. Some light rain in the air and some thunder, all very atmospheric, sensual. But I'm going to get on and talk about some of the questions and comments I've received and try and catch up with those. So, the first question. Oh, that's a difficult one. Can Phra Dan talk more about all different karmas that affect us and our universe, e.g. from Karma Sutras? Okay. So karmas in the Theravada tradition, karma. Now there are other Karma Sutras with different meanings, and I'm not talking about all of these. How have you spelt karmas? My way, yes. So karmas as in K-A-M-M-A-S in the Theravada tradition really just means action. Our actions of body, speech and mind result, and the results of karmas we call vipaka in the Pali word, have results. So this is the driving force, the momentum behind what pushes us forward into either rebirth in each and every moment as to what happens next, put quite simply, is a result of our actions of body, speech and mind. So if we do good things, then good things happen. Bad things happen. Now what you're asking me to talk about here is the different karmas that affect us and the universe. I don't think I'm going to be able to go into all of the effects of the karmas on the entire universe, and I don't think that is really to be encouraged. You've possibly heard the analogy of a butterfly flapping its wings in one side of the world creates a tidal wave on the other side of the world. I mean, this literally could be described as karmic action, but that butterfly had no intention, so there was no negative karma generated, albeit the results were very negative. And this is just a mythological thing. But the one of the four achintaya for imponderable or unponderable, I'm not sure, but not to be thought about questions that the Buddha, or what comes under that classification, one of these questions the Buddha said was to try and understand vipaka, all of the results of karma, more than just the simple understanding of good actions have good results, bad actions have bad results, to try and understand the full implications and predict the results of your own karma as to how it will affect you in this life or in future rebirths, is something we cannot answer. So it is a waste of time to spend your whole life trying to work this one out. Now, the universe, it's a big place. I don't know. I don't know how my actions directly will affect anything that goes on in the universe. All I can be sure of is through my own experience, and this is the same for each and every one of us, as to what our actions, our karma, will do to us really within this life. And we can only predict and guess how it will affect future lives if we have an understanding of rebirth. So really, I'll only say that on this subject, karma being actions of body, speech and mind, if we keep within Sila, our moral virtue, the 5 precepts, refraining from killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying and the taking of intoxicants, and we practice meditation, we keep this practice up of training our mind to be focused, to be clear and see clearly all that's going on with mindfulness in this present moment, then we will develop wholesome mind states. We will reduce our unwholesome mind states. This will cyclically return us to being able to maintain that moral virtue, Sila, and their Sila supports meditation. Meditation just supports the wisdom, Panya, and it continues in this cycle of activity, and this is our own karma. Now that can only have a positive effect on all we experience around us, and all of whom, all people, other beings, and the universe itself is affected by us. Just as a basic principle that I adopted myself, but is really partly a monastic principle, we as monks are to really blend into society, but to blend into nature, to make as little impact and difference physically as we possibly can in the world. So take as little from the world as possible, just what we barely need. Make as little impact on the world, this planet of ours, as we possibly can. Not affect society. We go out in the morning at certain specific times, just after dawn or just before dawn. So we arrive as the sun is rising. So it's not dark, so we don't disturb people. But when people are awake in Buddhist countries and have some food available, to give us food just once a day. We're not going around begging for food all day, interfering with people's lives. So after this activity and interaction with lay people, we disappear into the forest, into the jungle, into a cave, under a tree, for our practice, our abiding during the day, our practice of meditation. And this has little impact on society, other than their assurance that the monks are practicing this. They can come to us to listen to Dharma, to receive the Buddha's teachings, to reinforce their own Sila and their own practice, take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma and Sangha, the Triple Gem, and these supportive things. But other than that, we ask little of the universe. And I think that's all I really want to say about karma and the universe. Now, you can go into other traditions, other faiths, and find there's a lot more in the sutras, including the Karma Sutra. I can't remember which references that comes from in the context in which you're writing it and spelling it. But yes, actually, you spell it both ways in your message, so you might mean the other Karma Sutra, which is nothing to do with Buddhism. But I don't think you meant that. I think you meant karma as in actions of body, speech and mind in relation to Sila. So that's perhaps all I should say on that. What did I say in my written answer, by the way? Yes, I'll talk about this soon in another like this. So thank you for your interesting question. Right. Okay. So somebody's now asking me a question. Can I tell you about the practice of Kasina meditation? Now it seems like this is the second question in a row that I'm not answering, because likewise this is not my practice. Now Kasina meditation is where you focus mentally or literally on a particular colour and or light, but a light forming or providing this colour. So something less, not a picture, nothing interesting, a block colour, but of some brightness, some significance, noticeability. And one holds this image in your mind as a meditation object. And it is one of the 40 meditation objects. In fact, the different colours form a group, so a number of the 40 meditation objects that the Buddha mentioned, and includes like a candle flame or the sun, if you're very careful, or the moon, light of this nature, but generally a block light, an image. It's not a practice I use myself, so there's not much I can tell you about it, because I really only like to speak from experience. I use as my own personal practice in terms of where I've practiced from and come from in my training and my background, anapanasati, so mindfulness of the breath. And only in conjunction with that, or in addition to that, I practice in walking meditation, just mindfulness of this action of walking. I don't use any other forms of meditation myself and find it unnecessary to do so, because the breath is current in the present moment. It requires no imagination. It's there. It's always with us. It's constantly available. It's also within the body. It's bringing our attention and our awareness to within the body. So I can't tell you much or anything about the results of Kasina meditation. Your specific questions are really, you're just relating some of your own experience, and that's all you can really go by, and maybe find a teacher who teaches this particular practice. But I don't, so I'm not really qualified to answer that properly. So that's a second one I've kind of avoided. Next, can you give some resources on working through fear? Well, I have talked about fear in another full talk, and I've put the link in your question here to that video, which I don't know how I can share that with anybody now in this answer, but if you just put English Buddhist Monk and fear, I think it comes up. That's how I would have found it anyway, out of all these videos, because there's quite a few now, aren't there? Dear. So, fear, what is it? That's what you should, this is the main resource. What is it? Ask yourself this question. Well, fear is ultimately, I would say the fear of death, but it's not so much the fear of death, because we don't know what that entails. It's the fear of the unknown, and the fear of what may lead up to death, the cause of death. Maybe it was pain, or just a horrific experience that one goes through of tremendous trauma, physical, mental. But all of this is anxiety, anguish, fear-based emotion is based on uncertainty. Now, the best tool and resource to work with fear, which is uncertainty, is its opposite, which is certainty. And what is certain is that everything is impermanent, anicca. Everything is unsatisfactory, dukkha, and everything is out of our control, or not self, anatta. Now, with that as the very certainty in your life, any uncertainty can be made certain. So it is certain we are going to die. We are subject to aging, sickness and death. This is inevitable, it is certain, it is the unequivocal truth of life. These are the characteristics of existence. We cannot avoid it. So why fear it? Why fear the inevitable when we know it's going to happen and we're not the first to experience it? What happens after death we cannot know. If we can recall previous lives, we have an advantage, because we are here having experienced a previous life. We are here as a result of having died. But whether it was a traumatic an experience or not, we cannot remember it. It's been eradicated from our memory. Likewise, what is certain is we were born. But can you remember being born? An equally, if not more, traumatic process. To be taken or pushed from the sheltered, nourished, comfortable, perfect, if you like, life-breeding environment of the womb, where there's everything you need, the security, the protection, the love, the nutrition, everything a being, a life requires within the security of your mother's womb. to then be forcibly pushed out of a narrow canal into this world, which will feel very cold, drafty, unsafe, dangerous, and then have to gasp your first breaths and be maybe smacked on the bottom to do so, awakened to do so, and then learn all of this stuff just to survive in your first few minutes of existence on this planet, is equally as a traumatic experience as possibly death will be. Yet we cannot remember it. It's gone. That memory is erased from our memory banks. Even if we can remember right back until we were very young, that is very hard to recall. And often people have traumatic experiences in their lives where similarly this happens. It gets wiped from our memory. So there is no sense in prevaricating on this thought. When fear arises, understand what it is. It's uncertainty of what will happen next. But what will happen next is going to happen anyway. It's out of your control. If there is avoidance, an option of avoidance open to you, you can avoid a situation. But most often our fears are irrational fears. Fears, for instance, of heights, fears, for instance, of spiders that aren't particularly dangerous, can be very real fears in our minds, but often just facing up to those and looking at the reality of what they are and the truth that this spider cannot harm you and it is more frightened of you, and that this height is not going to hurt you unless you jump off. Just understanding that, knowing that, and examining that thought and that fear really does help eradicate it. And also, like with anxiety, find fear in the body. Find where the corresponding physical feeling of that emotion is. Again, like anxiety, it's much the same as fear. It's around this solar plexus central torso area, a feeling of lightness, butterflies, discomfort, unsatisfactoriness, if you like, dukkha, suffering, but of a physical nature. It's real, it's debilitating. I'm not belittling it. Of course, fear is a real thing, but it isn't a tangible object. More often than not, fear is of an irrational nature. When there is real fear, generally your body will take over. Hormones will be created as a result of our fight or flight instincts. Adrenaline, or whatever the other hormones that chemically are produced in our bodies, take away a lot of that physical anxiety feeling, and also the mental anguish, releasing you from fear. Knowing that can help prevent fear in its tracks. So that's about all I can say, but there's a full video on that whole subject somewhere here on this channel. Okay. Yes, I'm not sure what that one... Sorry, skipping. Somebody who's saying that they're listening to the chanting and using it to help their meditation, which is very nice, very good to hear. I'm glad some people listen to that. Is killing in self-defense and slander... Is killing in self-defense and slander is allowed. I think the ifs and ises have got mixed up on the typing correction. Right. Is killing in self-defense and slander is allowed? If not, then how Buddhist countries survived from attackers? I read it literally as it is. So I think we're saying here, if killing and in self-defense, well actually, so let's qualify this. We're allowed to defend ourselves. Obviously, breaking the first precept is killing. So intentionally killing another being, whether it's a human or a mosquito, is still killing and breaking the first precept. And so you could say that's not allowed. Now, this allowed thing, there's nobody actually stopping us. Of course, there are rules of countries and societies and organisations, guidelines, and things we have to adhere to. That's law. Law has nothing to do with Sila. Sila is moral virtue. And it isn't a do not do this. It is a refrain from. So we refrain from killing, intentional harming, killing other beings. Take away harming us. Specifically, the first precept is about killing. Refrain from killing other beings. But it gets extended to harming. So we can do that. But in self-defense, it is acceptable for us to defend ourselves with reasonable force, which would not include killing. So you'll find that a lot of the martial arts that are defensive come from countries with a strong Buddhist lineage background. Now, perhaps largely because of this reason, but they are defensive forms of combat, redirecting energies against the aggressor away from you. And this is a very important thing to understand. That is acceptable. Slander, I mean, I'm not sure where that really comes into it. Slander. Yes, I'm not really getting the first sentence at all, so I'm trying to make up the question as I go along here. But slander just comes under wrong speech in the Noble Eightfold Path. We have right speech, after right view, right intention, which is what is important behind all of the precepts. Sila, the intention. If you accidentally tread on an ant, you did not intend to kill it. The intention was not there, so it's karmically neutral, even though it's killing. It's regretful, but it's karmically neutral. It could not be helped. It was pitch black dark, the ant was there, you accidentally trod on it. You cannot even necessarily know you've done this. It's karmically neutral. But if you see an ant and stamp on it purposefully, that's intentionally killing, which is karmically negative. But with right speech, with the precept fourth, refraining from lying, it is just that, refraining from lying. But right speech, the third point on the Noble Eightfold Path, covers a whole array of area of speech, which would cover slander. So saying something nasty about someone, even in front of them, let alone behind their backs, that's bad, is of course to be refrained from. But it's not allowed. I mean, that isn't necessarily a breach of any law, or a great, in some people's view, perhaps not with right view, but some people's view, not the worst thing in the world you could do. But it can be hurtful, harmful, and it should be refrained from. But I don't know what that has to do with this next part of the question anyway. If not, then how Buddhist countries survived from attackers? Well, they haven't always. You could take, for example, Tibet, the entire country, community, including its spiritual leader, the Dalai Lama, his generation of countrymen, including monks and lay people, of which there were many, had to leave their country when they were overtaken forcibly by another country. And I'm just not going to say any particular names of countries because I don't want to get into any slanderous areas of conversation, but we know what I'm talking about. Similarly, you could say the same of Cambodia in the 70s, in my lifetime, when I was about 10 years of age, so not historical. Even the Dalai Lama, who's now approaching 90, so we're talking about in the 50s, had this, when he was obviously a young man, had this terrible situation. And they would not fight back. They did not fight back. Many of his monks were taken into captivity. And through their very strict sila and harmlessness, that they adhere to would take all kinds of abuse, but still try and practice metta, loving kindness, compassion, karuna, and equanimity, upekkha. Not so much mudita, joy for others in this circumstance, but you know where I'm coming from, maintaining these 4 Brahma Viharas, which is where they're so very strong in their practice, in the Tibetan practice. You'll find that in these persecuted groups of people in religious communities. They become very strong in their saddha, their faith, which is saddha, another quality, a parami, a quality we develop in our lives. Now, this is one example. Cambodia, in my lifetime, in the 70s, they wiped out one organisation, an individual led by one individual, wiped out two-thirds of their population, which included all, if not most at least, but all of the Buddhist monks, which was a huge number. It's a very Buddhist country, and now again, and still is. But it's much like Thailand. But they were all slaughtered, and very nastily, but they were they were unwilling to fight back. But then you take Thailand, through very skillful means, and very strict adherence to the Dharma and understanding, have managed to remain largely unconquered throughout history, even from their aggressors way back with the Mongolian invasions, and also Genghis Khan and all of this, all trying to take over this country, were unsuccessful because of their skillful means they employed, without fighting, without having to employ violence. So one example is why this Thai Forest tradition monks shave off our eyebrows, is for that very reason, because the aggressors would dress as monks because they knew the monks were trusted. There's so many of them, they could easily infiltrate villages and get into society ready to attack. So the real monks shaved off their eyebrows in Thailand, and then the not real monks, the Mongolian spies or invaders, would have eyebrows and be very easily recognizable by those that knew as imposters, and were able to be asked nicely to leave, which they would do because there were so many more normal people that weren't not attackers. They were just going in as a soldier, like a soldier ant, to investigate, so they would just leave without violence. And so there are skillful ways to avoid violence, but it doesn't always work. So in answer to your question, how Buddhist countries survive, they haven't always. In fact, from those examples, there's 2 that haven't against one that has. I'm not sure about Burma and Sri Lanka. They both have had quite a lot of internal fighting, but I don't know enough about that to comment, so I won't. Okay. Well, I didn't look at the time again, did I, when I started? I don't know why I don't do that. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Buddham Saranam Gacchami. Oh, someone's just chanting here. Okay, I'm not sure that was a question, it wasn't. Right, how do you know it's really a memory and not a different thought flying through your mind? Not sure what this is relating to, but anyway, when we dream, we also dream in first-person perspective, but we are someone else sometimes. How can you know that in meditation it's not just like a dream? So just start that question again. How do you know it's really a memory and not a different thought flying through your mind? Well, a memory is just a different thought. It's arising, it's not flying through your mind, it's arising, and it's maybe staying for a while, and then it may hang around longer or just pass away. Whether it's a memory or it's an imagination about the future, it's arising. What are we asking the question? How do you know if it's really a memory or just a different thought. So it's the same thing. So we can't differentiate between a memory and a thought, because a memory is a thought. Now, it doesn't mean that a thought is necessarily a memory, because a thought could also be an imagination about the future. But a memory is also a thought. So that's really the answer there. And how can you know that meditation is not like a dream? Well, because when you go into dreaming, you can be sitting in meditation and actually think, after some time I've been sitting there really awake, not dozing off, but in a dream, in a fantasy, in imagination, with the mind prevaricating on a subject or going into a story, a narrative, a thought process, similar to a dream. And they can become quite vivid, the dreams, and you still stay upright and don't fall off to sleep. Well, where this isn't meditation is that you have lost the meditation object. You have gone into a dream, a daydream. We call it in daydreaming is an often used expression. With children can be daydreaming through class rather than paying attention to the teacher. Now, this daydreaming is not the same as meditation. In meditation, one will stay with the meditation object even until it becomes very subtle, and it will only disappear when the other 5 hindrances disappear and the feelings of the body have, if not disappeared, almost gone, become so subtle that you're unaware of them, and thoughts of the past, thoughts of the future, all thinking becomes similarly so subtle it's not there, an absence of thought, not replaced by dream. And this is going into the deeper stages of samadhi. Now, this is very different from dreaming. That to differentiate between the two states, the stages we're talking about here in meditation, one can just say that if the meditation object is not there, it is dreaming. If it is still there, you are with the meditation object, and it is phenomena arising in your meditation, just similarly as the dream to be ignored. But if your mind is still with the meditation object, it is much easier to ignore this phenomena. If you've lost the meditation object, you will get carried away in the thought process of dreaming. Okay, I can see why crowded public transport might be problematical for a monk. As a layperson, I don't like sitting or standing close to strangers, but sometimes I don't have the option to do otherwise. I use this time to meditate. Have you any tips how to meditate whilst in a crowded environment? Oh yes, because these difficult situations that we have to face are very important in our practice. This practice of meditation is a third of our practice. If you put it in terms of Sila, moral virtue, Samadhi, meditation, and Panya, wisdom, then it's roughly a third of our practice. But it's also it's a third of the Noble Eightfold Path, really, if you take into account right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation, the three last points on the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a very important part, but it isn't just here, sitting in the meditation hall or temple, or in your room at home, or on a cushion in a meditation center. This isn't where meditation ends. We take what we learn through meditation, through the practice of focusing our mind on a meditation object, this exercise, this training of our mind, where we develop the ability to see clearly all phenomena arising, staying and passing away, being it physical, feelings in the body, or mental emotions in the mind. This we call vipassana, seeing clearly. This is what vipassana means. It is the other side, not something different to samadhi, because the ability to practice samadhi, focus on one object of attention, let's say the breath, mindfully, anapanasati, mindfulness of the breath. Brings your attention, your awareness all to that one thing, breathing in, breathing out. And maintaining that focus on that object for some time, which is difficult at first, but with practice becomes more easy, and you can do it for longer. This training of the mind enables you to have a heightened sense of awareness, but a more understanding and clearer view of what is going on. So when you are in a situation of an averse nature, either noisy or busy and crowded, giving you sensory interference, either through seeing, hearing, smelling, there could be horrible smells, horrible tastes in the air or flavours, or people pushing you around, so feeling. So all of these 5 senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, going on around you of an unpleasant nature, you will see in your mental capacity, your thought process, aversion arising against this that's going on. And you will feel in your body a physical reaction of wanting to move away, get away, but often in this crowded situation, the example you give on public transport of a bus or a tube train, something of this nature, you cannot go anywhere in any direction. Claustrophobia may come into play, this same anxiety or even fear, anguish, mental anguish, physical reactions in our bodies, bringing about this hormonal fight or flight chemical. It's not an imbalance really, because it's an imbalance as it's inappropriate for the circumstance, but it's the correct thing for your body to do. It just wants to rescue you from a situation, help you run away or fight against it. But of course this is not appropriate. So recognizing this, having trained our minds and developed this vipassana, this ability, recognizing this, we see this all arising. We breathe in through our nose deeply a few times, breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, bringing our awareness to that and that alone really does settle this whole feeling of anguish and this feeling of anxiety that starts to arise in our bodies. Brings us back into the present moment and allows us a little break in what's going on, a little distance from that which we're experiencing and that which is knowing the experience, putting that little distance gap between the two, knowing and experiencing, giving you a little buffer to know and realize that this isn't permanent. This situation will soon be over, or at some point will end. It is impermanent, anicca. It is suffering, yes, dukkha, but it's suffering because you have aversion to it. It's something you don't want to be happening. It's not suffering just because that man is standing there, this lady's standing there, this person smells like this, and this person behind you is doing that. That is the cause of the suffering. The real suffering, though, is you not wanting that to be the case. You reacting with aversion against all of those things, not wanting it. When you can see that truthfully, in reality, and clearly, seeing clearly, vipassana, as just your aversion to that, and your desire for it not to be that way, you also reinforce that buffering break you have and take away all of the anguish, all of the anxiety, any physical discomfort, and start to enjoy the breath even in that moment, bringing yourself back into that situation in your meditation center, on your cushion or in your room or wherever you meditate, even if only in your mind. And this is how you deal with those situations. This is how I deal with those situations. And by this way as well, because there are people could just close their eyes, or these days put these things in their ears and block it all out with some noise cancelling effect. The problem with this is it can be quite dangerous, of course, because then you are not aware. This is not vipassana. This is not seeing clearly. You've developed a heightened sense of awareness which may make you a little more sensitive to these situations at first. But the advantage is that you see them clearly and in reality for what they are. If you block it out by blocking your ears or closing your eyes, it is a little bit of a dangerous position to put yourself in. So that isn't, it can work, but it isn't, if you're sitting comfortably in a chair for a long time, you know you're not going to have to get up, then maybe put your things in your ears. But if you're having to keep your wits about you, because there could be people wanting to take things from you or push you out of the way, you need to keep awareness. But use the experience as part of the practice. Bring it into the experience of meditation as you are going about your daily activities. See aversion arising, see it passing away. See what it is you don't like. Oh, I didn't like that person touching me. Why was that? Because it invaded my space. Or anything that's occurring. Just, if it helps, label it, know it that way. Bring it to the forefront of your mind, your mindfulness. This is sati, this is mindfulness. And there's no better way to practice mindfulness than in real life, in these day-to-day activities of ours. But I cheat and get an Uber and not the bus, so that's what I'm doing now. Because I have to protect at all costs my Vinaya, and there are certain aspects of my respect for the Sangha, which is about how I present myself in public, how our rules ensure that we present the Sangha, it's not ourselves we're representing in public, we're wearing a uniform representing an ancient order of ordained monks. And if our robes start getting dragged off us in a public bus and our bowls bashing around everywhere, this is not respecting the idea of monks being in public. It should only be at a time whereby they can be seen, but blending into the backgrounds, but seen as that, as an object for veneration, not as individuals, but the Sangha as a whole. Now, if you are in the unfortunate position of having to be on a public bus as a bhikkhu, as an ordained monk, with the things we are required to carry with us, it isn't that practical. So I have come to the conclusion, having been a long time in Thailand now as a monk, just recently, where they put you in a different place on the bus, on specially marked coloured seats for just monks, and the same with all of their public transport, trains, planes. And also the people all know, because they're all born Buddhists, that they have to treat you with the respect that they're giving the Sangha, not you, but the Sangha. So it's very easy to go around on public transport. But when you're not in a Buddhist country and it's very busy and people don't understand that, quite understandably, mistakes will be made that could lead to breaches of our very important Vinaya, our rules, but they're our guidelines for maintaining faith, saddha, confidence in the Sangha. So I've taken this opportunity, as there have been some donations for the very few occasions that I need to go into Bangalore, to take what is actually a very inexpensive way of travelling, but a safer way of travelling for a bhikkhu. And I can also take for the same price with me a samanera, 1, 2 or even 3 in the same taxi. So for not much more money, it's more practical to do that. So I'm kind of cheating, but not cheating. I'm protecting the Sangha. I've travelled all over India as a layperson, in luggage racks on trains. I've had to jump in windows up in the north of India whilst the train's going along, and climb out of windows to get off of trains. All of this that you may have seen in the movies. I've done all of this. I've spent hours and hours on bustling railway stations, and days in fact on trains travelling, and done all of the sleeping in the car with the goats and the chickens and the charwala coming along. I have done all this, and I very much enjoyed it as a layperson, and would very much enjoy it still now, but I have given up, renounced lay life. So certain aspects of life which may not seem pleasurable to all, but I did enjoy that, so I'm not running away from it, and would enjoy it still now if I could really get involved with it. But I have to protect Sila, I have to protect this reputation of the Bhikkhu, this order of monks. So, sorry, just re-qualifying that there. So if you get the chance to come to India, just enjoy it. That's the thing. It can be great fun, but be careful, be safe, keep your wits about you. How do you know it's really... Oh, then that question goes on to say about this is about memory. Oh, sorry, this is that, going back to this memories, differentiating between memories and dreams, and I gave that answer I've just given you. Well, you know, because you've lost the meditation object. Then the question goes on, then how do you know it's glimpses from a past life? Well, when you experience that, you will know. You will know it's a glimpse from a past life, a memory from a past life. You will not mix that up with a dream. This is one of those things one can only experience and cannot talk about. Right. How can I measure my spiritual progress? I'm sorry, subscriber, I've just summed up your quite long question into a very short one. But you're describing very well a situation, but you're not quite understanding how you can measure your spiritual advancement, your progress in your practice. Now, the best way to do this is not to try and see it now. I know we talk about the present moment all of the time. I do. But like yourself, when you look in the mirror, we as monks don't have mirrors. I don't know whether you know that. We have to shave our heads and faces and everything without a mirror, but it's easily we get used to it. I'm not sure there's an actual Vinaya rule on this, but as a monk I've never had a mirror. So I haven't had a mirror for a long time. I don't know really what I look like other than if I see these videos, which on a phone aren't that clear, so I don't see those very well. But I see sometimes a reflection in a shop. The shops here in India don't have shop windows. They're open. But when I've been in visiting other countries, when I was in England, I saw myself often there in a reflection in a shop window, and I thought, oh, there's a monk walking with robes, because I'd never seen myself in robes, because a little mirror like this for shaving we don't have as monks, let alone a full length one. And as they don't have them in India, I hadn't seen myself as a monk full length. And when I was in England, I walked past my mother's local sort of co-op shop in her village, and I saw this monk in the reflection, thought, there's a monk walking. No, that's me. And it was quite a shock. What's the question? Oh yes, when you look in the mirror, you see no change from day to day. But if you look at a photograph of yourself 10 years ago, you can see quite a difference. Now, with your practice, it is similar to that. Take a situation now, how you react to it, and compare it to how you would have reacted to it, say, if you're just beginning practice 1 month ago. If it's a bit longer, maybe 3 months ago, a bit longer, 6 months ago, 1 year ago, 3 years ago, and so on. Go back in time, take something that you experience now, how you react to it, and compare your reaction to how you would have reacted to it in the past. Also, how you feel about things emotionally, how you experience things physically and emotionally now by comparison to that you experienced way back in the past, or in the near past if you've only been practicing a short while, where it's harder to see, but the more you practice, the longer you practice for, like a snapshot, a photograph of 10 years ago, go back. Take a snapshot, an example. Sometimes there are less tangible, sometimes there are more tangible examples. So someone comes and insults you, and you don't react. And you think, well, if that person had done that 5 years ago, I would have punched them on the nose right there and then. And there's an example of how much the practice has changed you, how you've developed equanimity, how you've developed Sila, and the principle of doing no harm. And this is the results of practicing this Sila, meditation, samadhi, and wisdom, panya. This is how we measure it. Just look back a little while. Even going back to your last or few meditation sessions and comparing. go over a few, because we're up and down, up and down, up and down. But over the steady passage of time, you'll see, and it is noticeable, the progress. I mean, if I saw myself properly clearly in a mirror now, I'd think I was, well, how long have I been on these sort of, this lifetime now, like this, of this practice without a mirror? Well, quite some time anyway. I've been a monk for 3 years, and I've been on the 8 precepts for then getting on for like 10 years. So I can go, you know, I've aged 10 years when I next look in a mirror. I don't think we've even got I don't know whether the other monks, the Samaneras, they've probably got mirrors in their bathrooms, but I've not been in their rooms, so I certainly haven't got that in mine. Rarely got water in mine. So that's that question. I think I might have run out of time. One more quick one. Oh, not that one. Well, I'll say it anyway. They say if you don't have sex, your testosterone levels deteriorate. If so, how come monks live so long? Well, that's an easy answer. I don't know. I mean, I suppose monks do have the reputation of living longer, but I think that's just as a result of a healthy lifestyle. Of course, Buddhist monks are celibate, and maybe what you say there about testosterone is true, but I don't know that for sure. So I'm sorry I can't answer that. It's not that I don't want to, I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me that it's a direct... I'm sure that there are people who are not celibate who live for a long time also. I think that's a bit of an overgeneralization. So I wouldn't say that that's necessarily factual. But thank you for the question and your interest anyway. If there's, I hope, something useful in amongst those comments and questions that I've talked about this evening that you can use. If there is, please use it. If it's not, then just forget about it and don't let it trouble you. And please share with anyone and everyone these videos, this channel, or whatever it is you share. I'm not really sure even how you do that, but whatever it is you do to share. But I think what I'm saying is one of the blessings in the chanting tonight, the Mangala Sutta, one of the sharing the Dharma, talking about the Dharma, is one of the highest blessings. So one way of sharing the Dharma is if you hear some Dharma that you find useful, share it with others by whatever means that is, by repeating it or sending it with a button technologically. However that's done, it's also practicing dana, giving, and it's also helping me give, because the only dana I can give, the only thing I have to offer is my sharing of my experiences in this practice of living as a Buddhist monk, being a Buddhist monk, not a teacher per se, because I'm a relatively new monk, albeit a long time practicing now the same way. Officially, one doesn't call, in the Theravada tradition, specifically in the Thai Forest Theravada tradition, I'm not sure about others, one doesn't call monks that haven't been ordained for more than 10 years teachers, as in Ajahn is the title. But I think it's fair to say that these days, in this day and age where communication is much easier, that many monks will discuss their experience and the Dharma this way. So I hope it's useful and you can share it. So, thank you for watching, and may you be happy and stay well. I'm all the wrong way round, so I'm a little confused. So that definitely means I've been sitting there for too long, talking too much.